Welcome to Regulatory Ramblings. Our guest today is a dear friend of HKU. Karena Belin is one of the instructors in our professional Fintech certificate course where she teaches a module on crowdfunding. She's also the Hong Kong-based co-founder and CEO of VUCA, a startup ecosystem builder and the largest startup platform in Hong Kong. Her group helps startups grow and enables stakeholders to connect with the innovative power of the ecosystem. They were also recently named the organizers of HK Fintech Week, which starts October 30th. And she's also the co-founder, COO, CFO, and RO, responsible officer, of Angel Hub, Hong Kong's first and only startup investment platform licensed by the SFC for professional investors and growth tech companies that are interested in scaling in Asia. She's also been deeply immersed in Hong Kong's startup scene for the past decade as a member of the Startup Committee of the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau of the HKSAR, and a member of the organizing committee of the Entrepreneurial Awards of the Federation of Hong Kong Industries, and a member of the HKTDC Belt and Road Greater Bay Area Committee. Karena was also named one of the 10 best female entrepreneurs of the world by the True Global Ventures and Women of Hope. And she's also volunteered at HKIS in multiple capacities. As you can see, she has many accolades. I won't belabor that. But Karena, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's such a great pleasure to be back here at HKU.
Much obliged. We're honored to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you grew up, and what your formative years were like.
Thank you. Actually, already your introduction shows that I'm not very young anymore, right? So
You're established. You're part of the community.
So I'll try to cut it relatively short because I think I've been really blessed on being able to work and live in different parts of the world. I grew up in Germany mostly. My passport is German. I had a chance to spend quite some time in the US. My father's work brought us there. But then actually, yeah, as you said, studied at the University of Mannheim and the ESSEC Business School in Paris. And there with that double diploma, I actually decided to start my professional career in France, in Paris, with Procter & Gamble, as you rightly said. And that gave me tremendous opportunities to come to Asia, to Japan first in 2005 for 7 years, and then moved with Procter & Gamble also here to now my beloved Hong Kong, which I call, which we call our home, because in the meantime we grew to a family. My husband and me have 3 children here, and I'm here already for 12 years. And it's also thanks to Hong Kong, or I would say I always owe Hong Kong the fact that I adventured out into entrepreneurship, and I definitely do not regret it. And I think if there's one place where you would really make this move, it's here in Hong Kong.
That is so true. Many people who you would never guess catch the entrepreneurial bug in Hong Kong, and it inspires them in ways you couldn't have imagined, and you know, great things have come of that. So, what prompted you to start W Hub and Angel Hub? I mean, you could have done many other things with your life.
Yes, I think the transition at that point in time wasn't that abrupt. So it was interesting that at Procter & Gamble, one of the things that really attracted me was that purpose-driven mindset of our mission up there was clearly defined as we're here to improve people's lives. And that was through bringing superior, fast-moving consumer goods to the industry. And I think I really resonated with that, and obviously resonated with the people that I work with. I think that is something particular for youngsters listening in, is probably something that really defines your career moves, in addition to having a very insightful career opportunity and great roles and responsibilities. It's really the people you work with and you do it with. So when my co-founder and me, so my co-founder Karen Conte, who actually also contributed to the HKU course. We knew each other from Japan, and we met here back in Hong Kong, and we realized that there was a tech and entrepreneur scene that was very small, very self-centered at that point in time, but very committed. And we truly found our passion and purpose on helping these tech entrepreneurs and their team to bring their service and product to life. And that resonated. So again, it was a pretty much purpose-driven look. These people are trying to solve problems, and some really important problems that we're facing with technology in very elegant ways. So wouldn't it be very, very purposeful and meaningful to help and support them? And at the same time, having lived in Japan for quite some time, and my co-founder Karen actually grew up most of the time in Japan. And she is, if you call me, coming from the finance sector, I always have a smile on my face because I remember Karen and me debating back in 2005-06, so who was really working in real finance. She was an exotic trader at JP Morgan, and obviously
that's cutting edge.
After Lehman happened, I think the definitions of real and not real finance started shifting a little bit. But that's a little bit the joke between the two of us.
Ephemeral finance.
But coming back, I think we also resonated a lot, not only in the banking sector or not only in typical corporate careers, and not only in maybe places like in Japan, where it might be challenging for some type of talent to really find their place in a corporate career. We felt also that the need really from the talent side to find alternatives to contribute to the economic growth to society and be working in maybe different structures than a typical corporate career. So as you can see, we saw these two problem statements. On the one hand side, entrepreneurs and relatively small teams and established teams here in Hong Kong. We can go back to Hong Kong's startup ecosystem, and that time was not necessarily youngster, it was maybe more career switchers who could bootstrap their companies to a certain stage, but then really needed talent to grow. And at the same time, we found when we saw the talent need to be able to find different career opportunities. Maybe also if you want to venture out from a typical marketing job to maybe something else, it's typically something you cannot do in a well-established corporate structure where you're hired for your expertise and track record and to deliver that over and over again, versus venturing out into a startup and a company where you can take on broader responsibilities, maybe learn along the way on the job. And so we saw these two problem statements probably matching. And what do you do in very good old entrepreneurial and startup mindset is, you make a leap of faith assumption. You say, here's a match to make. And that's how we started VUCA, really as a job recruiting platform, knowing that really being inspired by the startup teams, founders, to put them into the center and then help that matchmaking to become the jobs DB for startups. But as you could see, then logically trying to understand what else do you need as a startup to scale, not only talent, but visibility, customers, investment. So everything that we developed along the way from VUCA to then even founding Angel Hub was really driven by this purpose of making a change by helping startups, because we believe tech companies are the ones who are driving innovation and economic growth.
No, what you're doing is laudable, because a lot of I used to work for on campus, not here in Chicago, at Illinois Institute of Technology for the first half of 2006, and then I came back to Hong Kong. It was an on-campus tech incubator, and a lot of the time the common thread was engineers and scientists. They know their contraptions, their devices. They know the nuts and bolts of their invention. They don't know too much about anything else, especially if they're academics and they live in cloistered environments. And alerting them to the issues they will face in the marketplace is definitely something worthwhile. Lest I forget, congratulations on being awarded the HK Fintech Week contract. I know you weren't the only bidder, and it's a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. We're very, very excited, particularly actually in this year, to carry the torch forward from that really great brand name. I mean, beyond the brand name, like flagship conference that developed over the past 7 years. And now with a lot of things happening in the Hong Kong fintech space.
It's on the international calendar.
It's totally on the international calendar. And again, I think kudos to the entire ecosystem, and also the previous event organizers really on bringing this on the global map. I think that is the passion that very often unites us here in Hong Kong, be it entrepreneurs or people active in the space across organizations, across companies, even within regulators and established corporates, to see how can we really bring Hong Kong to its well-deserved position on the global map, and how we can really unleash the power of Hong Kong's ecosystem in the fintech space. And we can dig a little bit further, how fast actually since 2016 things really have developed to now also becoming a really thriving digital asset or Web3 hub, and lines obviously blurring in that sector between fintech and the Web3 space. So it's a very, very exciting moment right now, and we're very honored because we truly believe that with our purpose, also with our connection in the ecosystem, we can help to make this not only a typical conference, but really a industry enabling and shaping and advancing venue that is here to enable not only the local, but the regional and global fintech ecosystem.
I don't want to take anything away from Finnovasia. They've done a good job for a good number of years. And just as I have no doubt, you'll do a good job, because I've seen the bios of your team. You've assembled a good team, but it's a huge undertaking. It's going to require a lot of bandwidth. It's going to require working with the government, the politics, the bureaucratic rigmarole, all of that. Knowing all of that, what compelled you to go forward with this?
Yes, well, actually, we're not new to the conference business. So
right.
If I go a little bit back with VUCA, and I think even the way
it's the scale, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's a bigger scale, but we have been loyal supporters of the Hong Kong Startmeup Festival, also organized by Invest Hong Kong, and actually took over in 2020 a quite important position to become one of the core events and hosting that 2 days conference centerpiece, which we at that point in time brought for the first time really online, and brought even our government and other co-champions with us online to be one of the first online conferences back then in 2020, and really continue to. But before that, even in 2019 at the Convention Center, I think our SIS Startup and then Scale Up Impact Summit was coined one of the most international conferences that draw a big attendee point over here. What draws really to that, I think what is really interesting is even to go a bit back in time. If we think about the W Hub, we really see ourselves as an ecosystem enabler or accelerator, as you want to, as an ecosystem accelerator, not a dedicated only a specific startup scale-ups in a certain budget, but being the glue who brings the ecosystem together. And we do not necessarily need to execute programs ourselves. We started off on bringing a lot of hackathons and acceleration programs in collaboration with Techstars over. But again, a lot of these then developed on their own. We had our own acceleration programs here built up, incubation programs taking the place. Just to name, right, Cyberport, HKSCP in terms of incubation, but in terms of acceleration program, Brink, which is still running one of the finest hardware acceleration programs back then, that ventured out into health tech and Web3 and different areas. So all of that, again, we don't need to organize it ourselves and own it. And back in 2014, when Paddy Cosgrave was actually touring Asia to understand where he would land the sister platform of the Web Summit here in Asia, so the Asian sister Rise, we were actually really we were a group of a few close-knit people, including Casey Lau, including Invest Hong Kong.
I remember Rise.
Exactly, and really convincing him and telling Paddy, if there's one place you need to set up a tech conference, it's definitely here in Hong Kong. Particularly back then in 2015, it was a little bit the turning point. Over Singapore. One of the reasons we told him was it's because Hong Kong wasn't crowded at all. And if you want to take it at storm and want to make a difference, and if you want to have that connectivity really across Asia, it has to be Hong Kong. So here my point, Rise set up in 2015, and we really made it our pleasure on supporting the local ecosystem to be part of Rise, on supporting Rise, in really recruiting, startups across the region. So we did not go into the conference business straight away. We ran job fairs to, major tech events just to complement, Same actually as we did for Fintech Week previously. We ran job fairs, we ran hackathons just to complement the conference. Now, at the point when Rise went out, was like, wait a second. We still need a prominent tech conference here in Hong Kong. And that's actually when we started first tendering for Startmeup Hong Kong Festival and say, we want to be part of that to run a full-fledged tech conference. Why did we pivot to Fintech Week has much more to do with the synergies that we're driving through the investment platform. Because on Angel Hub, our investment mandate really focuses on Fintech, Web3, and tech-empowered ESG companies, which are really at the core on what Fintech Festival is.
Certainly there are opportunities to be had. And at that point, yeah, you could say 2015, you could say Hong Kong was more of a virgin territory, somewhat. But a virgin territory also means more hard work, right? As opposed to everything's already, the infrastructure's already set up in Singapore, even though it's more state-driven here, it's more market, industry-driven, which in the Hong Kong fashion means things tend to progress more slowly. They tend to adopt the wait-and-see approach. For a long time, if we were having this discussion 18 months, 2 years ago, we would say, just on crypto, virtual assets, we would say Singapore's in pole position. And then out of nowhere, the dark horse of Dubai came up, which is a whole other can of worms in its own regard. And I'm not entirely sanguine about Dubai, given, notwithstanding there's a lot of praise and press for it right now. But coming back to you, you came from the business world and you had ample experience from the corporate sector. You had a non-STEM background. You didn't have a traditional scientific engineering background, married to an MBA. And as I understand, your experience was in finance, strategic planning, forecasting, supply chains, business transition. So what prompted you to...
and tax law as well, which is the linkage to HKU law.
There is that. Mustn't forget that. So you chose to walk down the path of an entrepreneur, which is filled with risk and peril, but also great reward if you hit it off. And specifically, you chose the path of a tech entrepreneur. And even though we all use technology in our lives, if you were to tell most people to do something tech-oriented, like telling someone like me to learn Python, I mean, most people would maybe not tremble, but they would tend to back away from that. Most people don't want to do anything too tech or math or quantitatively inclined. So you plowed into a field you knew nothing about, but you had skills from your former life that were sort of applicable. How did that work out? So what was the moment of epiphany where you said, yes, I can do this, and that I can chart a path for myself in technology?
I think there's so many questions in this one question. And I think it's to answer the last one first. So there was no moment of epiphany. Exactly. There was no moment of epiphany. So it was I wouldn't call it a slippery slope because it's slope I would walk again every time, but it was a smooth slope. And I think my short answer would be, passion is a blessing and a curse. So I think once you really become passionate about something, and I was not the one who coined that phrase, nobody is as sexy as somebody who's passionate about something. And I think when you started, which comes a little bit back to the linkage at the beginning of being purpose-driven, right? And really resonating with making a meaningful impact to society. I think
but having the dream and the drive.
Yes, I mean, just to really, really reinforce what you say.
Because most people only have the form.
Is it a smooth road? No, it's a totally bumpy road for sure, right? And I think obviously very often the media would really translate it in a way that is totally inadequate, right? And again, it was not me who coined the phrase. It takes a long time to become famous overnight. So it's really hard work, and it's something that need to work on, and it's with a lot of things. But first of all. No, I do not have a tech background. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I became so passionate about it. Because I think being one of a very low-tech person to get into this space, I think I was just like a child in front of a Christmas tree, which really validated remember the problem statements that we were trying to solve. If you're an individual who wants to contribute, maybe in a different way that you used to contribute in your corporate career, and you find that so much more meaningful, well, there is a place for you to go. And I have to say, I would have never founded this company without my co-founder, Karen, and she has the engineering background. And as you also know, they're stating you a lot of these phrases that you can find on the walls of co-working spaces. For a successful tech company, you need the hacker, but you also need the hipster and the hustler. So coming back to what are some of the skills that I transferred from P&G.
Yeah, Jobs and Wozniak. Yeah.
Exactly. So what are some of the skills that I transferred? So yes, I was in a traditional finance career, but I was quite fortunate to be put on a fast track career within P&G, where you have the right or even the obligation to venture out into a different department just to brush up your skills to get you ready for general management.
So you knew operations.
I did sales.
Yeah.
So here you go. So I was really trained in persuasive selling at P&G, and so some of these skills on really having a passion on marketing a business idea and going to market definitely are things that I transferred. Particularly also when you grow, obviously having worked for a company with very strong structure and organizational discipline and rigor can help, particularly when you start launching a fintech company that is regulated by the SFC. So that, yes. Whereas I would argue some of the things at the beginning, I think you really have to unlearn when you come from a corporate career, because some of the things that do work very, very well in a structured organization is, yes, once you found your product market fit, then it's all about simplifying, standardizing, and scaling it. But a startup at the very beginning actually is in search for a product market fit. So you have to unlearn to be in a corporate setting. You have to be able to be agile, to be flexible. Ego should never be a problem, which probably as a founder isn't a problem anyway, because you don't mind your intern who joined you 3 weeks ago to find the right tone and manner to get you the right clicks and visibility on social media. It's not about chasing turf fights and whatsoever. It's really about solving that problem, bringing the company forward. So these are things I think you learn along the way. You naturally also get on. But then there are certain elements when you start growing the company. Obviously, yes, you look back and say like, okay, well, how did we do that? How did we structure that? What are things that we have to have in place? And very particular with the investment platform, again, when it comes in terms of assessing companies, assessing business plans, assessing financial models. I mean, that's what I used to do for P&G when we did the decisions for portfolio decisions in which company to invest, in which product lines to invest. You pan out, you do a financial planning for 5 years, and you try to understand what how you model the upsides, how you model return on investments, how do you assess risk. So all of these, of course, are skills that I can use now.
The science of business, the science of finance, and certainly too many founders of startups have been accused of having the sloppy, temperamental, artistic mindset, that there are things that don't occur to them, and that's why certainly they need someone like you. It strikes me, though, that as I look at the growth of fintech and crypto, that a lot of people in this space don't have tech backgrounds, and the ones that are techies and know about business, quite frankly, find them to be charlatans. Is that overstating the case, or do non-techies have something to add? Do they have some value to bring?
Definitely, which comes back to my statement, you need a hacker, a hipster, and a hustler. And I think very often, even now when we look from an angel point of view into investing into companies, obviously the earlier stage you go, you would find companies either particularly strong on the tech side, and maybe, as you said, lacking some acumen in terms of sales or in terms of business development, in terms of strategy, or even go to market, right? How do I market my product? Right. Yes, I know that my product is the best, but unfortunately it's not the love for my own product that counts to make sales happen. I need to be able to really tell a story and convey that and capture and sell that value to others to be able to have a sustainable business. On the other hand, as you said rightly, you might find teams that are very, very strong in understanding the market environment, the opportunity, can deliver a great sale, but then the product lacks in terms of competitiveness of technology. It's just not there. So I think the real challenge very, very early on, and obviously across the growth of companies and even in big corporates is still finding that right balance, right? And is trying to find the right equation and the right people mixture of having these different skill sets inside. So it's interesting. You talked about pace, and I really had a comment. I had to bite my tongue in terms when you talked about pace with regards to Hong Kong, and maybe we can get back to that, because I think one of the biggest things that always strikes me quite a lot is the lack of trust that we in Hong Kong have about our own capabilities as a Hong Kong ecosystem to grow. And I think very often people do the mistake on looking backwards. And I fully agree, 2015, we were so behind everyone. But to look from 2015 to 2019, we scaled over 10 unicorns in a short amount of period and leapfrog ahead and becoming one of the highest densities of unicorns per capita. And I think the pace of change in which things can happen here in Hong Kong is incredible. So
Yes,
you would
Singapore
always...
and Dubai get more respect?
I think actually, first of all,
The global media are covering them
absolutely,
more
absolutely, full stop. Yes, they do. You talked about, the power of marketing and storytelling. I think, yes, they do. Do they get it for...
We've got the biggest PR firms in the world. I mean, they charge a pretty penny in Hong Kong. So what are they doing wrong?
Well, I think what is really, I think, important if you think about just looking back in terms of what are we promoting, I think we're not enough promoting on the success cases here in Hong Kong. If you go back before 2021, I think we had like 4 or 5 unicorns in Singapore. And I'll just take that as one indicator, right? Because it's not only about unicorns, it's about a broader ecosystem. But if you take it as an indication of scaling a tech company successfully quite fast to a level of revenue that allows a certain valuation that is quite sizable, to be part of that rare club, which isn't that rare anymore, I know. But anyway, coming back to my point is, I think this is something that, did we communicate about it? So I don't know who is tasked to do that type of promotion. And I don't know. I mean, that's one of the roles, again, why WHub became so passionate about talking about it, by issuing our own white papers, by promoting, by being out there at conference and say, look, I think we're totally underestimated. And I think one of the things and the pitfalls I don't want to fall into is talking down on Singapore and Dubai. Oh, not at all. And I think as a startup, you don't want to be only in one place. You want to go global. You should be everywhere. You have opportunities to seize in Singapore that are much better to be put over there than here into Hong Kong. Same thing as Dubai. And we'll get to the Web3 space, because I think it's interesting to see that history somehow repeats itself, right? Where we could think, wow, our regulators might be very, very hesitant to take a proactive role into looking into the space, right? Into regulating the space. But look, I think one of the things that 2016 and onwards has taught us in fintech, as soon as our regulators become really, really serious, putting contact points in place. I don't know if you remember this, right? 2016, Fintech Week. Fintech Week is always the platform where policy and regulatory changes are at least announced or even, put forward. And 2016 was the first sandbox announced by the HKMA, only for incumbents. 1 year later, a joint sandbox, actually even before 2017, in the beginning, in spring, right? HKMA comes out with their seven or eight, I think there's 7 initiatives, including, the open API, including the faster payment service, including a few initiatives, a lot of talent development with ASTRI together. Brilliant. 2017 fall, again, Fintech Week. Here we go. Joint sandbox between the regulators, moving forward, announcing clearly we will get into the virtual banking space as well. Beginning 2019, the year of fintech, the first 2 or even 3 virtual insurance licenses approved by the insurance authorities, 7 virtual asset banking licenses approved by the HKMA before anybody else in the region. And then even a little bit further in the year, the SFC, announced a few companies. The SFC didn't announce. A few companies made it into the sandbox of the SFC, including Angel Hub on being the first regulated investment platform. So things changed super, super quickly. And even back in 2015, right? It was the first year the word startup made it into the budget declaration of our financial secretary. And since then, again, very fast. So looking forward now, Web3, you talked about it, great example. Last fall at Fintech Week, HKMA, SFC, standing out there and say, looking, particularly on the SFC in the Web3 space, we are going to look into the digital asset space. And that was after beginning 2022, a circular came out for all intermediaries that were dealing in virtual assets. We were like, wow, I think we're really far away from even being able to commercialize it to anything related to retail investors also. So look back now, we're July 2023, and there are different rumors out there on how many virtual asset trading platform applications are already out there.
Right.
And things can really move fast. And I think that's the impressive point of Hong Kong. So you will always underestimate Hong Kong if you look back. You should look forward.
Hearing you say that, I mean, for one thing, your excitement and passion is palpable. Many people, even if they feel that way, they don't let it on as much. And hearing you list the achievements year by year, clearly then that would leave one with the impression that Hong Kong has not been standing still. It's been working slowly, steadily, methodically towards its goals. Yet perception does become reality, and for whatever reason, not that much money is flooding into Hong Kong in these spaces versus other parts of the world that I've already named. So clearly marketing and telling your story is important. But in Dubai, they've got VARA, which, if you ask them, they've only got 12 regulators full-time, I understand. 2 of them are former Hong Kong emigres. They would say they're taking the light touch approach. You talk to people here, they would say it's borderline self-regulation, and self-regulation means no regulation, taking the post-2008 experience into account. That Hong Kong has more defined rules and rights, and that, I don't know, the sense is in Dubai they've given the industry too much of what they want. They're being too accommodating. They're being too lax. They're being too willing to bend over backwards. In Hong Kong, if I would use the hedge fund example, in 2006, you had hedge funds telling the SFC, Singapore doesn't expect this of us. And the SFC stood its ground and said, okay, fine, then go to Singapore. And that was a position that served Hong Kong well at that time, because then the crisis came. So this segues into my next question, which is, to what extent, as an entrepreneur, do you feel Hong Kong's legal and regulatory system is conducive to fintech entrepreneurs more generally, and are there any aspects of the local regulatory regime you'd like to see changed in terms of virtual assets, Web3, and the like? I mean, how do you feel about the local system as an entrepreneur?
Absolutely.
Yeah, has it hindered you? Has it helped you? Has it given you credibility in terms of your dealings overseas?
Yes. So again, lots of questions in one. I love it. And I think I probably start answering with building on a statement that you made, coming from that marketing element, right? So if I'm so passionate about it, why?
You're an effective salesman. That certainly helps in terms of selling. I mean.
Yeah, and again, I think actually the people in the space are very passionate. And if you tease them about compare yourselves to other ecosystems, you will see that passion come out. But I think at the same time, we're also the first ones to go out there and say we're not moving fast enough. Really engaging with, again, regulators, legislators, with the broader ecosystem, and saying, like, look, if we compare ourselves to some of the most thriving tech ecosystems around the world that maybe have started much earlier than us. But look, these are the paths we still need to go. I'm not talking fintech specific in general, right? Because again, if you think about that, I think that is arguably the power of Hong Kong. That at the one hand, you have the entrepreneurs and the people really believing in that wonderful mixture of ingredients. If you put it rightly together, it can create explosive companies, again, that are not just unicorns, but they're leading on the global agenda. I mean, again, look at it. I mean, SenseTime is not just a unicorn, right? If you think Animoca brand is not just a unicorn. If you think about BitMEX that came out, if you think about DJI coming out of Hong Kong, I mean, they are not just big companies. They're market leaders or in the top, ranks at the global level. So yes, we're passionate, but we're also the biggest criticizers, so to speak, because obviously, and that's another part to your question, which is, when you talk about regulatory framework, regulators never go first and never should go first and can go first. It's not about for regulators to innovate. It's for regulators to understand what does that innovation mean. What are the risks? What are the dangers?
And that's what irritates the industry about Singapore, because they're taking the top-down approach and saying,
yeah,
this
but
is how
look
it's going
what
to be.
happened, particularly in digital asset space. So they went ahead, and now they're
Because
making a
everything's
move
on provisional,
backwards.
nothing's being approved.
And then they made the move backwards, right?
Yeah.
And so again, I don't want to fall into the pitfall on comparing or downplaying what Singapore is doing. And I think actually one of the things that really helps us is really also that healthy, competition or benchmark to say, like, look, how are other people in the space looking at it? You talked about Dubai. I would like to correct you about VARA, because I think actually VARA is not falling into that category of the type of regulation not worth the paper it's written on. In contrary, I think it's really applaudable and laudable what VARA is doing in terms of an entire ecosystem play and really trying to design regulations that empower, not only to attract companies to set up shop there, but really empower an ecosystem. And what are regulators like VARA and even MAS in Singapore or here we're looking for is not to be that regulatory paradise and virgin island. You do need to create some type of passportability for companies to really, really come in and attract them, because again, tech companies per definition would love or have the aim to go global, right? Not to stay in a specific market. So, and I think you mentioned it yourself a little bit, like who are the people actually that are involved and really helping also to shape that framework. A lot of them are from the core fintech scene here in Hong Kong.
Yeah, a lot of Hong Kong immigrants, but
exactly.
If you look
and again, they're not immigrants in the sense. So they're in Dubai as well as here in Hong Kong, and I think they're particularly excited also to see that openness now here from the Hong Kong regulators to say, okay, look, now we really want to move forward. You had the question, does it help me or not? So, of course, I think, nobody would say, regulatory, let's say, license applications or so are the things that you love and as an entrepreneur. No, it's lengthy, it's uncertain, it's costly, right? It costs a lot of money, particularly in places here in Hong Kong. It costs a lot of money, right, to involve legal support, etc., to go through that licensing process. That I think on the same hand, as much as it is easy to always talk bad about the regulators on being the showstoppers, etc., in some elements, it really helps you as an entrepreneur as well to put business models in place that are sustainable, right? So some of them, of course, we get into the nitty gritty, we would say, okay, here we're overdoing it, and we talk about the same business, same risks, or same regulations. So these are in the nitty gritty. You start arguing. It's like, no, come on, let's be a little bit more pragmatic, and let's be also a little bit maybe more open to change. And we're actually talking same business, same risk. So why don't you try to push that agenda forward? So I'm not telling you that it's not something that at one point in time I would have been like, can we not go faster? But again, looking back to your point, I think it's great because on the other hand, once you are licensed, having a type 1 and type 4 is like, we have the same type 1 and type 4 that any other, financial institution that has a type 1 and type 4 out there, which really puts us at the therefore it helps.
It is an imprimatur of respectability.
Yeah.
But if you look at the rules that came out for virtual assets a month and a half ago, and we've done a couple of shows on that, there's more expected of them in Hong Kong than there is in Dubai.
Yeah. No, there is still more expected. I agree. And that's why I say, I think we're in the scene, we're very passionate on how things are changing. Because again, if we just go a little bit back in time, how long it took to be here where we are now, or let's say in November with that announcement. So we are now proactively going to look into the space. We're even looking into, retail investors and enabling, digital asset. That happened in November, right?
Yeah.
And now it's not even a full year where we have, license applications out there and we're going to see, licenses approved. Less than a year. And until then, we started looking really into the digital assets. So that's why we're very familiar with different regulators around the world, because obviously you go around and you say like, oh, where can I do what I want to do? Because I think it's meaningful. We're super excited because we thought like it will take much more than half a year to get there where we are. Are we there where we want to be? No, by no means. So again, we're at the same time, I think probably the biggest promoters
cheerleaders and critics.
And exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, no, that's fair. I mean, you play it fair in that regard. Hong Kongers, I mean, having grown up here, I will say, when they put their mind to something, they work very fast. And for the longest time, it was said they seize opportunities, but as time went by, my view was, yeah, they seize opportunities when they're 5 feet in front of them. But there's very little low-hanging fruit because Hong Kong is no longer a virgin territory. One has to be innovative. One has to be creative. You have to earn your keep. You have to earn your position at the table. And many felt that the what happened from 2019 onwards kind of killed the entrepreneurial drive. And yet, you have people like yourself, though you've been here for a while now. You're not a newcomer, but people come here and they see things with a fresh set of eyes. Many feel that entrepreneurial drive is dead or lagging. What in an environment where there's a sense of malaise, there's a sense of despair, Hong Kongers leaving for greener pastures to find that there are a few places in the world like Hong Kong, and in some cases returning, even from Singapore. What advice would you give young people, budding entrepreneurs, law school, business school, deciding what they want to do? Do they go down the professional path, start a business, enter tech? What? I mean, are there any common themes, threads, kernels of advice that you could give most people? I mean, it's difficult. It's different because the specific advice you're going to give one person traveling down one path may vary greatly from what you give someone else. But any life lessons learned that you'd like to impart, given that we are part of a university?
Yeah, absolutely, with pleasure. And I'll get back to some part of the original part of your questions as well. But to answer straight away first, I think if I compare graduates now versus when I graduated, and I'm not telling you how many years ago, again, I'm not outing myself in terms of age. I think, again, right now, you can look at the glass half full, half empty, which is, again, either a great opportunity or actually a big downside. And I'll get to what I mean by that is when I graduated, there was either a glass full or a glass empty. It's like either you get into some of these big consultancy firms, these big FMCG companies, these big investment banks, or even before you even think about what do you want to do in your life, right? You decide, okay.
Do you think it was more binary when you were growing up?
For me, at least, I'm really. It was super binary. You had to get into the best, at the best grade at graduation at high school, and to get into the best universities. From the best universities, particularly in the French system as well.
That's how it's in Europe.
Exactly.
Stepping stones.
Absolutely, stepping stones. So it was a ladder. It was clearly a ladder. It was so clear defined. If you want to become, let's say, the CFO of a fast-moving consumer goods company in the world, this is what you have to do. And this is what you tick the box on, and here we go. I think for the first time, it was Sheryl Sandberg in her book who talked about the jungle gym, where moving forwards, careers became much more lateral and much more maybe a little bit down to climb up faster. And I think my point was, I learned a lot from that traditional corporate career, as I said, going into entrepreneurship. Parts I had to unlearn, parts really helped me to have confidence to move forward. Nowadays, I think there is no more one path, which is, again, a great opportunity. So I wouldn't even say you have to start with a corporate or you have to start as an entrepreneur. I think whatever you do, is be very conscious about what are the type of experience you're signing up for, what are the skills that are you learning, and how are these transversally, applicable in other areas. So you can totally start off as an entrepreneur, run your business, and when you start recruiting for a big corporate, I think some of them are really looking for people that are much more entrepreneurial. I mean, every corporate nowadays wants to become a startup, right? Which is really funny because a startup starts up with trying to become a well-established business model and a big company. So my
they want
whole
that
point,
energy and that vision.
Yeah, my whole point is actually at this point, I don't think there is any wrong choice for a first move out of your career. If you are really listening in terms of what is the type of experience and the type of skill set I can acquire, hard skill, soft skill, network, and then you move forward. And then you can still, my dad started with one company, he retired with one company, it's still this company that pays his pension, right? Versus you start off today, I don't know how many percentage of people we will have who have like a one company career in their life. So this is the good news, but it's also the bad news because there's no more benchmark. There's not necessarily a right or wrong, right? You have to do this high school with this thing, and then this university, then this job, and then this type of, it's more uncertain. It's the VUCA world out there, even for a career.
Certainly, what you're saying certainly applies for my generation X.
Which actually, I wanted to get back, remember to the beginning, when you talked about entrepreneurship. Yeah. I think the number of times I heard that entrepreneurship is dead in Hong Kong or doesn't exist or is not as good as somewhere else. Again, I think history repeats itself a little bit. I think the biggest thing actually that really not killed entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship in Hong Kong is not dead, what really had a big, slowing effect on the development was COVID. Because I think one of the powers of Hong Kong that we sometimes underestimate,
freedom of travel,
is I'm not going to the travel necessarily. It's people meeting physically. We always say, the networking is in the DNA of people. And the number of times you reach out to somebody over LinkedIn or WhatsApp and say, can we meet up? I don't know, in less than 10% you get a no. You maybe get a not this week, but next week. Or you maybe get a, oh, not today because I'm in Central and you're in Quarry Bay and you're like really far away. Yeah. So maybe tomorrow because I happen to be in Quarry Bay. Yeah. But again, I think, and that's one, and coming back when you said about the role of government, etc. I think one of the things that we pride ourselves here in Hong Kong is that the entrepreneurial scene is actually built by the people, right? And you said that the government maybe only looks 5 steps ahead. I don't think it's necessarily the question of looking 5 steps ahead.
The people look for they'll seize opportunities, but only if it's 5 feet in front of them. They won't take my grandfather's mindset of don't wait for work, look for work.
Yes, but I think the point there is, I think what I very often compare is the incentive schemes. You have other governments, again, not to name the usual suspects that we already did in this conversation, who would really top-down decide, I'll put financial incentives into certain areas to boost. I think it's a little bit more the other way. It's like maybe give a bit of a sign. Look if the private sector picks it up. If the private sector picks up, there must be something. And then I look back into how can I enable it. So it's a little bit more this approach that I very often see here. And again, does that maybe create the more sustainable businesses? Maybe, I don't know. Again, I'm not here to judge, but I think it's just a different approach. And it's not necessarily, good or bad. And again, coming back, it's not about really doing it, black or white, just here or there. But I find it really interesting. I find it really intriguing. And again, at the one time, I'm really speaking for it, because I think there is a perception out there about Hong Kong that I think is not truly capturing it. At the same time, the value proposition, at the same time, inside, I would be again on the forefront on saying this is still what we need and we're still not here and this are still missing for us to really further foster the growth of the ecosystem.
And there are a lot of negative, toxic people out there. And I found many people in your position, they found for the sake of their peace of mind and their success, because negativity can be contagious, misery loves company. They tend to shy away from those people. And there is something to be said for sometimes that's just what you need to do. Tell us about the challenges you face as an entrepreneur. And has it been better, different, tougher as being a woman? I mean, in an ideal world, it wouldn't matter, but I guess that is something people would definitely want to hear about.
Yeah, right. And again, the first answer is always like, do you ask this question only to women or not? I mean, obviously, if you ask the question about a female entrepreneur, but I think it very often...
Because with men, it's the default, so it doesn't come up.
Yeah. I never felt that. And I don't know if it's just me in the way that I grew up in a village. I had an older brother for the longest time ever before. I had my younger sister, which was arguably my first child because she's 9 years younger, so I felt more like a mother than a sister to her. So I really, maybe it's because I always grew up in an environment where I was mostly around boys or guys, and I never really felt any different. And maybe my parents really instilled in me this, doesn't matter, if you're a girl or a boy, you just go out there and you do what you want to do. Maybe it was also working nearly 15 years for Procter & Gamble, who was a company who really put a huge focus on diversity, inclusion, and making sure that women had all the flexibility they needed to be really as successful as their male counterparts, despite some life-changing events that maybe only happen to women and not to men, like for example giving birth to three girls. So yes, so that may contribute to it. Maybe, by the way, maybe I do have certain things that work against me and I don't even know. Maybe, but I've never really. When I really feel it is yes, and when we proactively put the focus on what does it mean to be a female entrepreneur, and I think the typical part is when you get questions indeed from potential investors in terms of what is more important, your business or your kids. Again, I don't think it's necessarily a question you would ask a guy. I mean, is it more important to do the business or to be a father? Again, there's certain questions, yes, we get, and you can be offended by it, but I brush it up. At the end of the day, you vet your counterparts as much as they vet you. So
we live, and the world has come a long way. We live in a different world now. Certainly, most of the successful women I've known have said it. Oftentimes, it was only an issue to the extent I devoted my time and emotion and energy to.
That's beautifully said. I'll pick that up. I'll try to remember that.
Well, it's being recorded, so.
True.
So last question before we let you go. Women have made many inroads into banking, finance, and the corporate world, especially in this town.
Yeah.
There are many women in executive C-suite positions in Hong Kong. Yet we hear about the underrepresentation of women, particularly in tech. Is that something that can be cured? Is that something that can be fixed? Or do we have to acknowledge that people gravitate towards the fields they're meant to gravitate towards?
Yeah, I think definitely, particularly in fintech, by the way, where you inherit a gender diversity issue in financial services with a gender diversity issue in technology, and you combine them, it's not going to get any better, or rather getting worse. For sure. I think it also allows me to make a point I even wanted to make on earlier when we talked about, first career moves. And I think what we're talking right now in the advent of AI and generative AI, and even that, starting to grasp the impact it even has on learning and reskilling ourselves, or even on not necessarily knowing how to code, because if you can ask ChatGPT to write the code for you for a certain program that you really want to have, again, I think we're just discovering that. And I think back to your point in terms of how does that link to my reply to girls, I think I remember joining a very interesting training at P&G. Again, fabulous for its training and devotion to its employees. That was on purpose called Sex at Work. And it was really about gender biases that impact. And I think one of the biggest issues that we have in the financial services industry was the fact that a lot of these career paths, even previously at P&G, were geared to a typical from 25 to 35, you have to be all in. And then once you're there, then that's how you can get to the rest of the top ranks. Which obviously, if you want to somehow slot in giving birth to children, probably puts you on the back burner, and that might be one of the issues that could explain it, right? Again, these gender biases on having boys bosses that maybe favor boys over girls, all of that could happen, even though there's an interesting study out there from McKinsey that says that women bosses are 50% supportive and 50% non-supportive to women employees.
Yeah, I saw that.
But my point on technology, and again, I'm not an expert, I'm not, in that, I'll just quote again, I think it was Sheryl Sandberg who said it. I think it was really also the type of how do we give access to technology to children? And I think a lot at the very beginning, it was when computers were associated to typewriting machines. Actually, the gender bias was the other way around. You had more female on computers than male, because it looked like a typewriting machine, and so it was put in their hands. And then if we look into a lot of how people get access to, through gaming or through other areas that were typically typically more boys category type, they had a nicer access or an easier access to technology and then even learn that. And I think with a lot of games, even in Roblox or so, making technology already from a consumption point of view accessible to girls. So it's not only the fighting game, the killing game, but it's like
strategies. No, there
are certain strategies out there, and I think schools are very much aware. So I'm pretty much involved in the school of my girls, and I can see the tremendous, really thought process in how do we, level up these biases on boys more generally, playing with technology, and that's very often how it starts. You play with technology, and then you start, I may not want to consume, but I want to build something. That is something where we break it out, and that is really important.
But there is a huge generational divide, and I think
I agree.
it transcends gender in that.
Yeah.
When I was in primary school in the early 80s,
totally.
Computers were just starting to be rolled out. Fast forward 10 years later, my cousin, who's 10 years younger than me, by the time he was born, computers looked more like what they do today. They were already at a pretty evolved state. The graphical user interface was the standard. Whereas I remember the days of DOS.
Yeah, exactly.
And having to type in commands to
everybody had their Commodore 64.
Well, that's even further back. But to operationalize a disk, and you need multiple disks, multiple floppies to upload a program. That wasn't the case then, and certainly that's how I can believe you see toddlers very comfortable with technology because they've been exposed to it at an early age, and people are concerned that that's going to lead to a different type of wiring of their brains because that much. Some parents now are saying no technology, no, none of these gadgets for the early part of their children's lives.
Yeah.
So I do think there's that generational divide, but yeah, there's that gender gap. But yeah, female gamers do exist. I know I know a number of
and much more games actually in that. Again, if I look, I only have girls at home, so 3 girls. But again, I think one is really on different type of games inside Roblox. And again, it might be a start, and I think it's an evening-filling conversation about the benefits and the dangers of gaming for sure. But I think it definitely will play a role on helping, giving more access also to girls. And that's the only thing for sure. I just want to give it as an example. Again, I'm not a research professor in that, so you probably should ask that a question to somebody in that field. But I do feel that really we're seeing already a shift. We can still see, going into classes, and I see on Maker Day, and the girls would innovate on very different product categories than boys. And I mean, it would be really interesting to better understand, why, and if we really want to completely, and I don't know if we have to completely level it out, but what would that entail?
Yeah, discussion for another time. Karena Belin, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you'll come back again.
Thank you very much. It was such a great pleasure.
Yeah, it was fun. And to our viewers, thank you all for joining us. Until next time.